Hello, Haunted Family. Welcome back. Story 1. An Apparition. When I was about 8 years old, we moved from Cleveland, Ohio to rural West Virginia. My parents, being Appalachian people, wanted to move back home to the area with their family and their roots. This area was very mountainous and rugged, with a vast amount of foliage. The house we moved into was on a creek, and it was in need of serious repair. Because it would only be temporary housing for us, we just decided to make it work. Our closest neighbor was about 3/4 of a mile down the creek on a winding, narrow, isolated road. This area was nothing like I experienced in Cleveland. My parents, along with my 5 other brothers and sisters, I'm the baby of the family, made do in the cramped confines of the house. For the first couple weeks, nothing unusual happened. What was unusual, however, was the constant questions my brothers and sisters and I encountered almost daily from school children as to the haunted house we supposedly lived in. We simply didn't pay any attention to any of these questions. We hadn't seen or heard anything to give credence to these questions. One spring evening, though, that changed dramatically. My parents, along with one of my sisters, had gone to town for groceries and to visit my dad's brother. This town is about 20 miles away, and we expected them back by nightfall. When we first witnessed the apparition, I was home with my 2 sisters and my brother. That evening, the 4 of us were watching television in the living room. Our dog was tied up on the front porch, and he began barking hysterically and incessantly. Due to the urgency of his barking, my brother and my eldest sister and I quickly jumped up and ran to open the front door, thinking that it must be a visiting neighbor. It was then that we peered towards where our dog was barking, and standing straight as a soldier on the edge of the house was the figure of a man with a slicker top jacket on and what looked like a fisherman top hat. The figure was flat black, with no light reflecting off of it whatsoever. It almost appeared to be a black hole of some sort, blacker than black. By the way he was standing, we could only make out the front half of the figure, as the back half was hidden by the corner of the house. We initially thought it was a man who wanted to break into our home, until it moved. As I write these words, I am again reliving the cold chills. As it moved in one single unit, with no body motion at all. That is, it moved as one would move a solid object. And I swear to you, this thing floated above the ground by about 1 foot. This figure floated down our gravel driveway, making no sound whatsoever. Made a turn at the road and was gone. My mother, on a later occasion, sitting in the doorway after a spring rain, said that she witnessed the same figure come up out of the roadway, run up the driveway before disappearing behind our house. Lastly, on another evening, a short while later, my entire family and I heard all hell break loose in our unoccupied attic. Crashing sounds as though someone was breaking glass and stomping through it woke us all up. My father and my eldest brother armed themselves with makeshift weapons and climbed the attic stairs. thinking that surely a madman had broke in and was destroying our attic. When they opened the door, they found nothing. Nothing had been displaced, not a thing. Even the cobwebs were undisturbed. My dad was finally fully convinced this house was bad news. We moved shortly thereafter. Story 2. My haunted house. It was the early 70s. My husband and I bought a house that was only about 2 years old. It had previously been rented out by a very large, happy family. After we moved in, strange but rather comforting things started happening on a relatively regular basis, which continued for the almost 10 years we lived there. As an example, one afternoon I arrived home, tired from a day of teaching public high school. I went upstairs to change clothes and take a nap, and then attack the huge stack of English papers that I needed to grade. When I opened our closet, I discovered, to my delight, that all the clothes had been neatly arranged by type and color. My shoes had been neatly placed side by side. The shelves were tidy. Everything was in shipshape. This pleased me enormously. My husband worked nights at the time, so when he called that evening for our nightly chat, I thanked him profusely for his hard work on the closet that day. He replied in a really serious tone and very no-nonsense way that he hadn't even opened our closet door that day, having put out his clothes the night before to change into. Because we were often alone in the house at different times, we independently heard very similar phenomena. Heavy steps, both upstairs and downstairs. We could smell the mouth-watering aroma of freshly baked bread. Lost items showing up in bizarre places. And the pervasive feeling of being watched over. Because anytime we try to plant something outside, digging holes for new trees or shrubs, we would find handmade nails or handmade hinges, things of that nature. We asked a local historian about the background of our area. He informed us that we lived on what used to be a plantation of really large proportions for our area. Could it be that some dear lady from the last century was trying to take care of 2 young, disorganized newlyweds? Story 3. Body of water. I was staying with a friend for a week back in the mid-70s. She lived down the road from my parents' home. On that Sunday, I woke up and went downstairs to the kitchen. This house is really old and large, and they lived on the water. I went down to the kitchen to get a glass of water. I got the glass, and I felt the really strong presence of someone standing behind me. I turned around, and there was my friend's sister, standing right there behind me. But she had drowned 5 years earlier in that very body of water that this house sat on. I turned around very fast and closed my eyes. I wanted to run, but couldn't move. As I slowly opened my eyes, out in front of me was the window that looked out across the water. I saw a young girl in the water frantically waving her hands back and forth, as if she was in trouble. I ran out of the house, and as I got to the edge of the water, there was no one there. I got in my car and I went home. I couldn't believe what I saw. A day later, I got a phone call from my friend, asking me if everything was okay, because I left without saying goodbye. I told her no, that I wasn't feeling well. She asked me if I saw something or heard something, and I said yes. I told her what I saw, and she said, "Don't worry about it. It happens from time to time." But needless to say, I have never went back to that house. I stay in contact with my friend by phone. Story 4. My new apartment. My fiance and I moved into our new apartment about a week ago. The very first day in, I felt a presence. It started after my fiance and I were intimate. I knew right away that it was not happy. It felt like I could feel him breathing, like I could hear him breathing. I could feel his rage and jealousy. Frightened, I tried to wake up my fiance but couldn't. The next day, we were cuddling on the couch, and our ghostly visitor arrived again. This time my fiance felt him too. Within days, the curtains started moving. Faucets started turning themselves on. And the game of hide-and-go-seek with our belongings began. We started hearing knocking on the walls. I decided to talk to the spirit. I thought by acknowledging him would help. But honestly, it seemed to make things worse. I was standing in our doorway. When I took a step, I felt something brush my hand. And when I looked at it, there was a cut about 2 inches long on my ring finger. And bruises started showing up on both my fiance and I. We don't know where they came from. The only time Sean feels him is after a romantic time with me, or a hug, a kiss, anything of that nature. People who come over feel something, but they can't tell what it is. I think we're going to have to get the church involved to try to get rid of him, once and for all. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the stories. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe if you want to. Drop me a comment down below. I love hearing from you. Until next time, bye. Music by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio.